The morning my dog refused to let me leave my apartment, I thought she had finally lost her mind. I remember the sound of her growl more than anything else. Not loud, not vicious, just low, steady, like a warning vibrating straight through the floorboards into my bones. Kova had not once in the 6 years she had been by my side. She was the kind of German shepherd strangers trusted instinctively, calm eyes, patient posture, the sort of dog who'd sit beside a crying child as if she understood grief better than most adults. But that morning she stood between me and the front door like a guard who had decided I was the enemy. The clock on my phone read 8:12 a.m. The meeting was at 9, the most important meeting of my career, the kind that people describe years later as the turning point. The Denver tech startup office was expecting me. My sister had arranged everything, the introductions, the recommendation, the chance I wasn't qualified enough to get on my own. Natalia always believed in me a little more than I believed in myself, and there I was in a pressed navy blazer, one shoe on, one shoe off, arguing with a dog. "Kova," I whispered, crouching slightly. "Move, girl. Come on." Her ears pinned back. The growl deepened. She shifted her weight, paws planted firmly against the hardwood, tail stiff. Her eyes didn't look angry. They looked afraid. That's what unsettled me. Dogs bark when they're excited. They growl when they're threatened. But fear, real fear, shows itself in stillness, in silence, in the refusal to blink. I reached for the door handle. Her body lunged forward, not to bite, not to attack, but to block. Her shoulder pressed against my thigh with enough force to push me back a step. The leash hanging by the door swung slightly, clicking against the wall like a metronome measuring my irritation. I checked my phone again. 3 missed calls from Natalia. The 4th came right then. Her name lit up the screen, and with it came the familiar knot of guilt. Natalia had spent weeks arranging this opportunity. She'd stayed up late reviewing my resume, rewriting sentences, reminding me to breathe whenever I started doubting myself. She'd always been that way, the older sister who fixed things, smoothed things, carried more than her share. I answered. "Hey, where are you?" Her voice was already tight. No greeting, no softness. "I'm about to leave. You were supposed to be there early, Julian." "Carter is already in the conference room. I told him you're reliable." I looked at Kova. She hadn't moved. Her gaze flicked from my face to the door and back again, like she was tracking something I couldn't see. "I know," I said. Don't tell me there's just," Natalia cut in. "This is your future. Do you understand that? People don't get handed these chances." I swallowed. The air in the apartment felt thick, though the heater had been running all night. Denver winters had a way of creeping into the walls, turning every surface cold and every breath visible. But this was different. It wasn't cold. It was heavy. Kova let out another low rumble. "What is that noise?" Natalia asked. Kova's being weird. Weird how? "She won't let me leave." There was a pause, then a sharp exhale. "Julian, she's a dog. Step over her." I tried. She keeps blocking the door." "You're not seriously telling me you're late because of your pet." Her words stung more than they should have. I rubbed my temple, feeling the faint pulse of a headache beginning behind my eyes. "I'm coming. Just give me 5 minutes." "You don't have 5 minutes," she said. "You needed to be there 10 minutes ago." The line went quiet, then softer, almost pleading. "Please don't sabotage yourself again." Again. That word carried years of history, the jobs I'd quit too soon, the opportunities I'd hesitated on until they vanished, the safe choices that kept me comfortable but never fulfilled. Natalia had always been the brave one, the one who moved cities, negotiated salaries, asked questions I was afraid to ask. "I'm not sabotaging anything," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was convincing her or myself. When the call ended, the apartment fell into a silence so complete I could hear the ticking of the cheap kitchen clock. Each second felt accusatory. Each second felt like a door closing somewhere far away. I picked up my other shoe. Kova barked. One sharp sound. It echoed off the walls, startling me enough that I dropped it. "What is wrong with you?" I whispered. She stepped closer, pressing her head against my hip now, physically steering me away from the door. Her nose nudged my hand, not affectionately, insistently. Her breathing was faster than usual. I knelt and placed my palm against her chest. Her heart was racing. A memory flickered, Natalia laughing months earlier, telling me dogs could sense earthquakes before humans. I'd teased her about believing everything she read online. She'd shrugged and said, "Sometimes instinct is smarter than logic." I looked at the door again. The handle, the thin strip of light beneath it from the hallway. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. Just an ordinary morning demanding ordinary decisions. My phone buzzed again. A text from Natalia Plathers starting. "Where are you?" I typed back, "On my way," but my fingers hovered over the send button. Kova's eyes were still on me. Not pleading. Not begging. Warning. I don't know why I listened to her. Maybe it was the tremor in her body. Maybe it was the strange weight in the air. Maybe it was the quiet voice inside me, the one I'd ignored too many times before, telling me to pause. I set the phone down. "I'll wait 5 minutes," I murmured, more to myself than to her. "Then we go." Kova's body relaxed, just slightly. She didn't move from the door, but the growl faded. She sat, alert, watching. 5 minutes felt like an eternity. And I had no idea that those 5 minutes were already rewriting the rest of my life. And 5 minutes stretched into 10, and 10 into 20. At first I stood there with my coat half on, like a man frozen between two versions of himself, the responsible professional who kept his commitments, and the uneasy soul who couldn't shake the feeling that something invisible was pressing against his chest. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking clock and the hum of the heater, a dull mechanical sound I had heard every winter without ever really listening to it. Kova never took her eyes off the door. I remember thinking how strange it was that she wasn't pacing. Dogs pace when they're anxious. They whine, scratch, circle. But she didn't. She just sat there, rigid, ears twitching at sounds I couldn't hear. Every few seconds her nose lifted slightly, sniffing the air with short, deliberate breaths. I slipped off my coat. It felt like betrayal, not just of the meeting, but of Natalia. She had spent weeks preparing me for this. I could still hear her voice from the night before, warm and encouraging as we sat at my kitchen table eating leftover pasta from mismatched bowls. "You deserve this, Jules," she'd said, twirling noodles around her fork. "You're smarter than you think. You just need to show up." Show up. 2 simple words. And yet they carried the weight of every opportunity I had hesitated on in my life. Natalia had always been my opposite, fearless where I was cautious, decisive where I overthought. She wore bright colors. I owned variations of gray. She filled rooms with laughter. I preferred corners where conversations were optional. But she never made me feel small. That was her gift. She believed in people so fiercely that sometimes they started believing in themselves just to live up to her expectations. The phone buzzed again on the counter. Another text. "Carter is asking for you." Then another. What do I tell him? I stared at the messages until the words blurred. My thumbs hovered, but I couldn't find a sentence that didn't sound pathetic. "My dog won't let me leave" wasn't exactly professional. It sounded like an excuse a teenager would invent to skip school. I typed, "Tell him I'm dealing with something urgent. I'll join remotely." A lie softened by vagueness. Kova shifted slightly, her nails clicking against the floor. She turned her head toward the hallway outside the apartment, then back at me. Her nose twitched again. I walked to the window and opened it a crack. The winter air slipped in, sharp and clean, carrying the distant scent of snow and car exhaust. It felt easier to breathe with the window open, though I couldn't explain why. My chest had been tight all morning. I'd blamed nerves. Now, standing there with cold air brushing my face, I realized the tightness was fading. "You're being ridiculous," I muttered to myself, but I didn't close the window. Silence. Then, "What? I'm not coming in." Her breath hitched. "You're joking. I'll join remotely." "That's not what we agreed on. You said you'd be here in person." "I know, but what?" Her tone sharpened. "You promised me. You promised yourself." I looked at Kova. She was standing now, body tense again. ears pointed at the door. The heater hummed louder, then quieter, then louder again, like it was struggling to keep up. "She won't let me leave," I said, hating how absurd it sounded even as it left my mouth. Natalia exhaled slowly, the way she did when she was trying not to lose her temper. "Julian, listen to yourself. You're letting a dog dictate your career. It's not just that. Then what is it?" I searched for words and found none that didn't sound foolish. "I just don't feel right." "You never feel right before something important," she replied. "That's anxiety. That's not intuition. That's fear dressed up as wisdom." Her words stung because they were true often enough to be convincing. "You're self-sabotaging," she continued, her voice rising. "Do you know how many people would kill for—" "I put my reputation on the line for you." "I know," I whispered. "Then act like it." The line went quiet again. When she spoke next, her voice was softer but edged with disappointment. "I can't keep doing this for you, Jules. I can't keep pushing you toward doors you refuse to walk through." I closed my eyes. The smell of coffee, the cold air from the window, the faint metallic scent I couldn't quite place, all of it swirled together. My head felt light, not dizzy, just distant. "I'll log in," I said. "Give me 10 minutes. "Fine," she replied, relief flooding her tone. "Just please don't disappear." When the call ended, guilt settled over me like a heavy coat I couldn't shrug off. I opened my laptop, placed it on the table, and stared at the login screen. My reflection in the black glass looked pale, tired, and never enemy. Older than 30, too. Kova approached slowly and placed her head on my knee. Her eyes met mine, deep brown and steady. She didn't whine. She didn't paw. She simply looked at me as if she were asking a question I didn't know how to answer. "Okay," I murmured. "We'll stay." The decision felt irrational and yet oddly peaceful, like stepping off a moving walkway and finally standing still. I sent Natalia a final message. "I'm staying home. I'll call later." Her reply came almost instantly. "You're making a mistake." I set the phone face down. The heater clicked again, a hollow metallic sound that echoed through the vents. The air felt heavier for a moment, then lighter when I leaned closer to the open window. I didn't connect the dots. I didn't recognize the signs. I just knew that sitting there, with Kova's warm weight against my leg and the cold Denver air brushing my skin, I felt safer than I had when he'd been standing at the door. Outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance. Somewhere, life was moving forward as planned, meetings beginning, buses arriving, people stepping into offices with coffee cups and confident smiles. And I stayed on my couch, believing I had just postponed a career-defining moment. I had no idea I had postponed my own funeral. The first sign that something was truly wrong came in the form of a headache I couldn't shake. Not sharp, not blinding. Just a dull pressure behind my eyes, like someone pressing their thumb gently but persistently against my forehead. I blamed the coffee. Then the stress. Then the poor sleep I'd had the night before. It's strange how our minds reach for ordinary explanations, even when something inside us is whispering that the ordinary doesn't quite fit. Kova refused to leave my side. Normally, around mid-morning, she would bring me her leash, a quiet request for a walk. That day, the leash hung untouched by the door. She followed me from the couch to the kitchen, from the kitchen to the bathroom, from the bathroom back to the couch, but every time I drifted even slightly toward the front door, her body stiffened. Once, when I picked up my coat absent-mindedly, she barked so sharply that my heart jumped into my throat. I set the coat back down. "All right," I murmured. Message received. The apartment smelled different. I noticed it while rinsing my mug in the sink. Not unpleasant, just unfamiliar, a faint metallic scent, almost sweet, almost invisible. The kind of smell you catch and then doubt immediately after, like a memory you're not sure is yours. I opened another window. The winter air slipped in again, crisp and clean, brushing the back of my neck. My breathing eased. That tight band around my chest loosened a little more. It felt like stepping outside after being in a crowded elevator, relief without knowing why. My phone lay silent for nearly an hour. No texts, no call. That alone was unusual. Natalia was a communicator by nature. She filled silence the way others filled cups, generously and often. I told myself she was busy with the meeting, busy smoothing over my absence, busy being the dependable one again. Guilt settled in waves. I opened my laptop twice, intending to join the meeting anyway. Both times, Kova nudged the screen closed with her nose. The first time I laughed. The second time I felt a flicker of unease. "You're impossible today," I whispered. She looked at me as if I'd missed the point entirely. Around 11, I tried to distract myself with chores. I folded laundry slowly, pairing socks with unnecessary precision. I wiped down the kitchen counter even though it was already clean. I reorganized the bookshelf, running my fingers along the spines of novels I'd promised myself I would reread someday. Normal life. The illusion of control. But beneath it all, something hummed quietly. The heater kicking on and off. The faint pressure in my head. The way the apartment felt heavier near the hallway and lighter near the windows. I moved through rooms unconsciously choosing the spots where breathing felt easiest, never stopping to quit. At 11:37 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Natalia. "Call me when you can." No emoji, no exclamation mark. Just a period. I stared at it longer than necessary. My first instinct was to call immediately, but a strange hesitation crept in. Not fear. Just, resistance. I told myself she was probably annoyed, maybe embarrassed, maybe disappointed. All emotions I was accustomed to navigating with her. I typed back, "Everything okay?" No reply. Kova lifted her head from the rug, ears twitching. She walked to the door again and sniffed along the bottom edge, then returned to me and pressed her body against my leg. Her fur was warm, grounding. I scratched behind her ears, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing begin to slow. Another 30 minutes passed. The headache dulled but never vanished. My eyelids felt heavy, the way they do after a long flight. I poured another cup of coffee and realized halfway through that I couldn't taste it properly. The bitterness was faint, like it had been watered down. I added sugar without thinking, then another spoonful, chasing a flavor that wouldn't come. At noon, the heater clicked loudly, a metallic clang that echoed through the vents like a dropped pipe. I flinched. Kova stood instantly, alert, gaze fixed on the hallway ceiling where the vent was hidden behind a metal grate. The sound faded. Silence returned. I remember thinking I should call maintenance about it. Had been making odd noises all winter. I even opened my notes app to write a reminder. But the thought drifted away before my fingers finished typing. It's unsettling. Looking back, how many small warnings we dismiss because they arrive quietly. At 12:18 p.m., my phone rang. Not Natalia. The screen showed an unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something, curiosity, maybe, made me swipe to answer. "Hello." Silence for a second. Then a man's voice, breathless, uneven. "Julian. Julian Vance. Yes. This is Carter Blackwood." My stomach tightened. The name landed like a stone in water, sending ripples through my chest. Carter Blackwood, the CEO, the man I was supposed to meet that morning. The man Natalia had spoken about with such respect, such optimism. "Hello," I said, sitting up straighter. "I'm sorry I couldn't make it in today." Where are you?" he interrupted. "At home." A sharp inhale on the other end, then another. His breathing sounded wrong, fast, shaky, like someone who had been running or crying. In the background, I could hear distant voices, sirens maybe, or just the echo of chaos. "Are you alone?" he asked. Yes, there was a pause. Long enough for dread to begin forming a shape I couldn't yet see. "Julian," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "You were supposed to be here." "I know, I don't apologize." The words came out strained. Just listen to me." My fingers tightened around the phone. Kova stood, ears forward, watching my face as if she understood every syllable. "There's been an accident," Carter continued. "A serious one." The room felt suddenly smaller. My headache pulsed once, hard, then receded. "What kind of accident?" I asked. He hesitated. I could hear sirens clearly now, shouting. The muffled thud of doors closing somewhere far away. The heating system, he said finally. It malfunctioned. Carbon monoxide leak. We didn't know. No one knew. The words didn't register at first. They floated past me like unfamiliar vocabulary. Julian, he whispered. Everyone in the conference room. They collapsed. My throat went dry. They're saying it started early this morning, before 9. The gas built up. There was no alarm. No warning. His voice broke. We thought you were late. The phone trembled in my hand. Kova pressed against my knee again, grounding me to the floor, to the present, to the thin thread of reality that hadn't yet snapped. Where's Natalia? I asked. Silence answered first. Then Carter inhaled shakily. She was at your desk, trying to log you into the meeting. The world tilted. The ticking clock on the wall grew louder, each second hammering into my skull. My chest tightened, not with the morning's vague pressure, but with something sharp and immediate, fear taking shape at last. Is she okay? On the other end of the line, Carter began to cry. And in that moment, before he even spoke the words, I already knew that the life I'd woken up to that morning no longer existed. There is a sound a human voice makes when it carries unbearable news. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. Mandercation. It's fragile, like glass about to shatter but trying desperately to hold its shape. Carter's voice had that sound, and before he finished his sentence, before the words fully reached my ears, my body understood what my mind refused to accept. She didn't make it, Julian. The sentence was simple. 4 words. No explanation, no softness. Just a quiet truth placed between us like a stone that could never be lifted again. I don't remember standing up, but I was suddenly on my feet. The room tilted sideways. The window, the couch, the chipped mug on the counter, everything looked distant, like scenery viewed through thick glass. My heartbeat thundered so loudly that for a moment I couldn't hear Carter anymore. I'm so sorry, he kept saying. I'm so sorry. My lips parted, but no sound came out. It felt as if language itself had abandoned me. May. The word no floated somewhere in my chest, but it refused to rise to my throat. Denial isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent disbelief, the kind that leaves you standing still while the world continues moving without you. Kova pressed her body against my legs, grounding me to the floor. Her warmth was the only thing that felt real. How? I managed to whisper. Carter inhaled shakily. The paramedics said the leak started hours before anyone arrived. The building sealed up overnight because of the cold. By the time people came in, the gas was already at dangerous levels. It's odorless. Invisible. You don't realize it's happening. Odorless. Invisible. I looked around my apartment. The open windows, the drifting winter air, the heater vent in the ceiling. My stomach clenched as pieces of the morning rearranged themselves into a pattern I hadn't recognized before. The tightness in my chest, the dull headache, the strange metallic sweetness I couldn't quite place. Kova blocking the door. Kova refusing to let me stay near the hallway. She was sitting at your laptop, Carter continued, his voice breaking again. Trying to log you into the meeting. She told us you'd join. She kept saying you were just running late. The image formed without permission. Natalia at my desk, leaning forward slightly. Her hair tucked behind one ear, the way she always did when she concentrated. Her brow furrowed, lips pressed together, fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. Protecting me, even in my absence. She kept checking her phone, he whispered, waiting for you. My knees gave out. I sank onto the couch without feeling the motion. The phone slid from my ear to my shoulder, Carter's apologies turning into distant static. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, indifferent to the fact that time had just split my life into before and after. I thought of her last message. You're making a mistake. She had been right. And yet she had been wrong in a way neither of us could have imagined. The guilt arrived first, not grief. Not sorrow. Guilt. Heavy and immediate, like a weight dropped onto my chest. If I had gone, if I had listened, if I had stepped over Kova and walked out that door like a rational adult, Natalia wouldn't have been at my desk. She wouldn't have been breathing that poisoned air while defending my reliability. She would still be alive. The thought clawed at me, relentless and cruel. Kova lifted her head and rested her chin on my thigh. Her eyes searched my face, deep and steady, as if she sensed the storm rising inside me. I buried my fingers in her fur, holding onto her like a lifeline. "You saved me," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was thanking her or accusing her, because the truth was unbearable. My life had been preserved by the same instinct that had taken Natalia's. Carter's voice returned, clearer now. "The authorities are investigating. It was a faulty heating system. And they're calling it a tragic accident, an accident." The word sounded hollow, too small, too neat, as if it could wrap itself around the enormity of what had happened and make it manageable. But there was nothing manageable about it. Natalia wasn't a statistic. She was the person who remembered my birthday before I did. The one who sent me photos of sunsets because she knew I worked too late to see them. The one who believed doors existed simply because she had the courage to knock. "I should have been there," I said. Carter hesitated. "Julian, if you had been, you wouldn't be on this call right now." The sentence hung between us, heavy with implication. The room seemed to shrink further, the air thick with realization. The headache that had plagued me all morning vanished entirely, replaced by a cold clarity that cut straight through my thoughts. I was alive because I had stayed home. Natalia was gone because she had gone. The phone call ended eventually. I don't remember how. I only remember sitting there, staring at the blank screen, waiting for reality to reverse itself, waiting for Natalia's name to appear with a laughing emoji and a message saying it was all a misunderstanding. It never did. The apartment felt impossibly quiet. Even the heater seemed to have stopped humming, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing on cold pavement. Somewhere a dog barked, ordinary sounds continuing in a world that had just shifted irreversibly. I walked to the window and opened it wider. The winter air rushed in, sharp enough to sting my lungs. I welcomed the pain. It proved I was still here. Carbon monoxide. The words echoed in my mind, attaching themselves to every strange detail of the morning, the heaviness, the sweetness in the air, the way breathing felt easier near the windows. The way Kova had refused to let me stay near the door where the hallway vent ran above the ceiling. She had sensed it. Not fear, not aggression. Warning. I looked down at her. She sat beside me, calm now, her tail resting against the floor. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't look proud. She looked relieved, as if the danger she had been guarding me against had finally passed, and in that realization came a second wave of grief, deeper, quieter, more devastating. Natalia had always been my protector in the human world, guiding me through decisions, pushing me toward opportunities, shielding me from my own doubts. And that morning, when an invisible threat crept into the air, it was Kova who had taken that role without hesitation. One protector had saved me. Another had died. I pressed my forehead against the cold window glass and finally allowed the tears to come. They weren't loud. They didn't shake my shoulders. They slid silently down my cheeks, warm against the winter chill, carrying with them every memory of Natalia's laughter, her stubborn optimism, the way she'd squeeze my shoulder when she wanted me to believe in myself just a little more. The sun hung pale over the city, indifferent and distant. Life inside my apartment, everything had changed, and in the stillness that followed, one truth settled into my heart with painful clarity. Trust had saved my life, but it had cost me the person who trusted me most. Grief does not arrive all at once. It comes in layers. Like waves that don't crash loudly but keep returning, each one colder than the last. The first few hours after Carter's call felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's tragedy through a muted television screen. I moved slowly, mechanically, drinking water, sitting down, standing up again, all without remembering why I'd started any of those motions. Kova stayed close, closer than usual. If I walked to the kitchen, she followed. If I sat, she rested her head on my knee. When I went to the bathroom and closed the door, she lay right outside it, her tail thumping once against the floor as if to remind me that I wasn't alone, even when loneliness had already settled deep inside my chest. The news broke online by early afternoon. I saw it accidentally while scrolling through my phone, hoping for a message from Natalia that would never come. A headline with the company name, words like fatal, leak, and investigation, a grainy photo of the office building surrounded by emergency vehicles. I recognized the glass facade instantly. The place I was supposed to be that morning, the conference room I had pictured myself walking into with nervous confidence. My name wasn't there. Natalia's wasn't either. The victims were still unidentified. But I knew. And knowing before the world knew felt like carrying a secret too heavy for my shoulders. I called my parents next. It was the hardest conversation of my life. Harder than breakups. Harder than admitting failures. Harder than any apology I'd ever given. Because this time, there were no words that could soften reality. No phrases that could cushion the fall. I remember my mother's silence more than her cries. The long pause after I said Natalia's name, as if her mind refused to let the meaning attach itself to the sound. My father asked practical questions. Dates, times, locations. The kind of questions people ask when logic is the only tool they have left to keep themselves upright. I answered them with a voice that didn't feel like mine. After the call, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, staring at the ceiling vent. The metal grate looked ordinary, harmless. A square frame holding nothing but shadows. And yet it represented something I hadn't respected enough. The invisible dangers that exist without announcement. Kova lay beside me, her breathing slow and steady. I placed my hand on her ribs, counting each rise and fall like a metronome keeping me tethered to the present. She had sensed something I hadn't, something no human nose could detect, something silent and lethal. "You knew," I whispered. Her ear twitched. "You tried to tell me." She looked at me briefly, then rested her chin on her paws again. No pride, no expectation of praise, just quiet. It struck me then how pure her instinct had been. She hadn't acted out of logic or self-interest. She had simply recognized danger and chosen to stand between it and me, and Natalia. Natalia had done the same in her own way for years. The days that followed blurred together like watercolor bleeding across paper. There were phone calls from officials, paperwork, questions from insurance representatives, messages from acquaintances who didn't know what to say but felt compelled to say something. Each interaction chipped away at the fragile numbness that had initially protected me. The funeral was a week later. I remember the smell of lilies, too sweet, too heavy, the kind of scent that lingers in the throat. I remember the way people spoke in hushed voices, as if volume alone could disturb the peace of the dead. Natalia's photo stood near the casket, her smiling in that bright, effortless way she had, eyes crinkling at the corners, hair catching sunlight. It looked like a picture taken on a day full of plans. I kept thinking, she was sitting at my desk. The thought looped endlessly, attaching itself to every condolence offered, every hand squeezed, every sympathetic nod. People told me it wasn't my fault. They said it was an accident. They said Natalia would have wanted me to forgive myself, but forgiveness felt premature, like skipping chapters in a book that demanded to be read slowly. Kova attended the service with me. Some people found it unusual, others found it touching. She lay quietly at my feet throughout the ceremony, her presence a steady weight against the... When I stood to speak, my hands trembled, not from fear of public speaking, but from the realization that I was summarizing a life too vibrant to fit into a few minutes. Natalia believed in people, I said, my voice softer than I intended, sometimes more than they believed in themselves. She protected the future of those she loved, even when they didn't see it. I didn't say my name. I didn't have to. Afterward, as people drifted away in small clusters, offering final hugs and murmured prayers, I stayed behind. The room emptied until it was just me, the faint echo of footsteps, and Kova's quiet breathing. I knelt beside the casket and placed my palm on the polished wood, feeling the cool surface beneath my skin. "I stayed home," I whispered. "I don't know if that makes me lucky or a coward, The truth, I realized then, was more complicated than either word. I had trusted a warning I didn't fully understand. Natalia had trusted a future she believed in completely. Both choices were made out of instinct. Both were acts of faith. Only one had allowed a second sunrise. In the weeks that followed, investigations confirmed what Carter had said. Faulty heating system, no functional carbon monoxide detectors, a chain of overlooked maintenance requests. Words like negligence and liability began appearing in official settlement discussions started quietly, wrapped in legal language that tried to quantify loss in numbers. Numbers felt obscene. No sum could measure Natalia's laugh. No check could replace the way she'd text me photos of stray cats she wanted to adopt. No settlement could recreate the warmth of her hand, squeezing my shoulder when I hesitated before a decision. And yet, the world runs on numbers, paperwork, signatures, outcomes. One evening, sitting at the kitchen table with documents spread before me, I felt a shift, subtle but undeniable. Grief was still there, heavy and constant, but beneath it, something else stirred. Not anger, not revenge, something quieter. Purpose, perhaps. A question forming where despair had been. Kova rested her head on my foot as I read through the settlement offer. Her presence grounded me again, the same way it had that morning when she'd refused to let me leave. I realized then that Natalia's death, as unbearable as it was, had revealed something undeniable. Invisible dangers don't announce themselves. They don't knock. They don't ask permission. They simply exist, waiting for someone to notice them before it's too late. Natalia had spent her life protecting people she loved from visible risks, missed opportunities, self-doubt, hesitation. Kova had protected me from an invisible one, and I began to wonder if the only way to survive this grief was to turn protection into something larger than memory. Something that could breathe beyond me. Something that could carry Natalia's name into rooms she would never walk into again. The thought didn't heal me, but it gave my pain a direction, and sometimes, direction is the first step back toward life. The days that followed were a strange mixture of bureaucratic tedium and private reckoning. Settlement meetings, insurance forms, legal documents, each one a sterile attempt to quantify a human life, to put a price tag on someone like Natalia, on her laughter, her stubborn optimism, the way she believed fiercely in people who had stopped believing in themselves. Each signature I made felt hollow, but each one edged me closer to a decision. I couldn't delay any longer. I remembered the moment it came clearly to me. Kova and I were walking through the park near my apartment, the cold Denver wind biting through my jacket, the snow crunching beneath our boots. Kova ran ahead, sniffing every tree, every patch of snow, and as I watched her, I realized something. Her instincts had saved me that morning. Her senses had detected danger I couldn't perceive, and Natalia had spent her life protecting people the way Kova had protected me. I wanted to honor that, not with flowers, not with plaques, not with words I would later forget. I wanted something practical, something that could save lives, something that would make the invisible visible. That evening, I began researching carbon monoxide detection systems. I read studies, consumer reports, even medical journals. I learned how common undetected leaks were, how often fatalities could have been prevented by something as simple as a working detector. I began calling companies, negotiating prices, discussing bulk orders. It was painstaking work, technical and cold at first, but gradually it felt like a lifeline. Each phone call, each spreadsheet, each calculation was a step toward transforming grief into action. Kova, I said one night as she lay curled at my feet, we're going to do something important. We're going to make sure what happened to Natalia, doesn't happen to anyone else. She tilted her head and rested her chin back down as if she understood. I started small, friends, neighbors, then friends of friends. Each time I installed a detector in someone's home, I thought of Natalia sitting at my desk, fingers poised over the keyboard trying to keep me safe. I'm sad. Every unit that beeped into life became a tribute to her vigilance, her selflessness. And then an idea came to me. Kova had instincts, a sharpness I wanted to replicate on a larger scale. She had been my guardian that day, sensing the invisible threat. What if I could train her to do it for others? to detect danger before humans could. It wasn't simple. It wasn't fast. But I found a trainer, a certified detection dog expert in Colorado, and we started working. The training was rigorous. Long days of repetition, scent drills, and conditioning. Kova adapted quickly, learning to alert at the faintest traces of carbon monoxide. The way she'd behaved that morning, the way she'd tried to block me from the hallway, became her model. Every alert she gave was a whisper of that morning, a reminder of what instinct could achieve when it was respected. I named the initiative the Natalia Vance Foundation, and slowly, methodically, it began to grow. Free detection systems for families who couldn't afford them, training programs for dogs and their owners. Each success carried a bittersweet weight. I celebrated quietly when families installed the detectors. I smiled when Kova's alerts prevented incidents. But in the quiet moments, late nights when the house was still and the city's hum was distant, I felt Natalia's absence like a cold hand pressing against my chest. People asked why I dedicated so much to this cause. I told them about the dangers of carbon monoxide, about invisible threats, about instinct. I didn't talk about her death, not in detail. It was too personal. But those who knew me, who knew her, understood. They understood the debt I carried and the promise I was keeping. I started speaking at schools, at community centers, about safety, awareness, and trust. I told stories about dogs, about family, about paying attention to the quiet signs. Not one story mentioned the tragedy directly, but I watched children's eyes widen as they learned about unseen dangers. I watched adults lean in, nodding, absorbing lessons they didn't realize they already needed. And all the while, Kova was there. Alert, intelligent, steadfast. She became more than a companion. She became a partner and Every time she indicated danger in a training exercise, I felt a flash of that morning, the low, steady growl, the shoulder pressed against my thigh, the warning I had almost ignored. She was teaching me to trust instinct, to respect the signs even when logic suggested otherwise. It didn't erase the grief. It didn't bring Natalia back, but it gave it shape, a direction, something I could pour energy into that mattered, something that could save lives in her name. One winter evening, a year after that morning, I stood by the window with Kova at my side. The sun had set, and the city lights shimmered against the snow. I thought about the path that had led me here, the terrifying choice to stay home, the devastating consequence, the slow reconstruction of purpose from grief. I touched Kova's fur. "We're doing good, girl." She'd be proud. Her ears twitched, and her eyes met mine, calm, steady, unwavering. She had been the first to warn me. Now, she was the first to carry forward the work Natalia had begun in her own way. It wasn't justice. It wasn't a cure for the loss. It was something subtler, quieter, and infinitely more human, the decision to transform tragedy into vigilance, to honor a life taken too soon by saving others, to listen, finally, to instinct, to love, to responsibility. The Natalia Vance Foundation grew. Families who never imagined they'd need carbon monoxide detectors had them installed. Dogs trained alongside Kova began alerting households to invisible threats, and slowly, imperceptibly, the world became a little safer, because one sister's protection and one dog's instinct had refused to be ignored. I still think about that morning, often. About the cold air on my face, the metallic sweetness in the apartment, Kova's growl, Natalia at my desk. The line between instinct and choice had been razor thin, and the lesson, the painful, uncompromising truth, was clear. Trust the signs. Respect the warnings. Act before. Because sometimes saving a life comes at a cost you can't imagine. And sometimes survival is not victory. It is responsibility. Grief changes shape over time. In the beginning, it is sharp and jagged, cutting through every ordinary moment. Then, slowly, it softens, not healed, not gone, but transformed into something that can coexist with daily life. For me, the transformation was subtle, almost imperceptible. I still woke in the mornings with a hollow ache where Natalia's voice should have been, end. I still saw her in reflections, at the coffee shop at crosswalks, leaning into conversation with a familiar warmth. The memory of her was constant, a living shadow that refused to fade. But alongside that shadow grew something new: purpose, responsibility, a mission that extended beyond the walls of my grief. The Natalia Vanes Foundation became a structure, a community, a movement. Grants were distributed, detection systems installed, educational seminars held. People began to recognize the logo, a simple symbol of a dog's paw inside a triangle, representing protection. Kova became a small celebrity of sorts in the detection dog world, her calm intelligence and unwavering focus inspiring other trainers and handlers. And yet, every success carried a quiet reminder: the cost of vigilance is sometimes unimaginable. My career had been saved by Kova's instinct that day. My life had been preserved, but Natalia's had been taken. The duality of that reality never left me. It shaped me, taught me, molded me into someone who understood that choices, even when right, could carry unbearable consequences. Months passed. I visited families who had received detectors personally. One evening, a mother hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you. You don't know how much this means." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I didn't tell her about Natalia. I didn't have to. Every detector, every training session, every alert Kova gave was already a tribute, already a continuation of her protection. I began to speak at conferences, sharing our story in measured, factual tones, not for attention, not for accolades, but to instill awareness, to teach others to respect instinct, to act before it's too late. I told the audiences sometimes danger is invisible. You won't smell it, you won't see it, you won't hear it until it's already too late. Trust the warnings from the people who love you, from the signs you can't explain, and never ignore them. People listened. Some nodded, some wept quietly. And sometimes, just sometimes, I imagined Natalia sitting beside me, offering that gentle push forward she had always been so generous with. Kova thrived in her new role as well. Training exercises became competitions of skill and instinct. She could detect carbon monoxide traces at levels far below what humans could perceive. Each alert she gave, each training success, was a testament to that morning, to the growl that had saved my life, to the warning I had finally heeded. But the deepest work happened inside me. Grief, purpose, and guilt interwove. I allowed myself to feel each emotion fully, rather than suppress. I spoke with a counselor who helped me understand that guilt is not proof of failure, it is proof of love. That surviving while someone else does not is not a punishment, but a responsibility. That honoring the dead does not require me to vanish into sorrow, but to carry forward their mission with integrity and care. I began journaling. Small notes at first, observations about Kova's behavior, the way families reacted to detectors, reflections on loss and survival. Over time, the journal grew into something larger, a manual of instinct, safety, and human responsibility. A guide not just to carbon monoxide detection, but to listening, and in quiet moments, I would still sit with Kova at my feet, the city lights casting long shadows across the apartment. I would whisper to her, recounting memories of Natalia, her laughter, her stubborn optimism, her unwavering faith in me. It wasn't therapy. It was remembrance. A ritual of love, a ritual of honor. I learned to celebrate life again in small increments. The smell of coffee in the morning, the way snow falls in soft layers over Denver streets, the sound of Kova's paws on hardwood. I allowed myself to smile when a family thanked us, when a child learned about safety, when Kova successfully detected a faint co-trace in training. Each moment was a thread weaving grief into purpose. And slowly, I began to see the truth in all of it. Survival is not just a chance occurrence. It carries meaning only when paired with action, when paired with responsibility, when paired with honor. Natalia's absence was a permanent wound. Kova's loyalty was permanent guidance. And the work we had begun together, the foundation, the detectors, the education, the trained dogs, that was permanent impact. But I understood, finally, that grief and purpose can coexist, that love, even in the wake of tragedy, can be expressed through action. That instinct, whether human or canine, is a gift to be trusted, a compass in a world full of invisible threats. And every time I watch Kova alert to a subtle scent during training, I remember that morning. I remember the growl that saved me. I remember Natalia's smile, her faith, and her final act of protection. And I know, with quiet certainty, that even in loss, life can carry forward into something meaningful. Because meaning is not always born from joy. Sometimes it is forged in fire, in silence, and in acts of courage that the world may never see. And in that there is peace. I sit now by the window, Kova curled at my feet, city lights spilling across the snow like tiny constellations scattered on the streets. The apartment smells faintly of pine, scented cleaner, the lingering aroma of coffee from this morning, and Kova's warm fur pressed against my leg. It is ordinary, and yet it is sacred, because life continues, fragile and beautiful, even after it shatters. Sometimes I still think of that morning, the growl, the refusal to let me leave, the metallic sweetness in the air that I didn't understand. I think of Natalia at my desk, trying to protect me the way she had always protected everyone she loved, and I ask myself, what would I have done if I had ignored that warning? If I had put ambition before instinct, before love? I don't have all the answers. But I do know this, instinct matters. Listening matters. And love is not only shown in life but honored in action. The Natalia Vance Foundation, the detectors, the training, they are my way of keeping her light alive, of ensuring that invisible threats have witnesses, guardians, and safeguards. Every time a family installs a detector, every time Kova alerts in training, I feel her presence. Quiet, persistent, guiding, reminding me that survival is not just about being alive, it's about what you do with the life you've been given. So I ask you, gently, when someone or something in your life warns you, when instinct nudges, when a loved one urges caution, will you listen? Will you honor that warning before it's too late? And if this story touches your heart, please consider subscribing, sharing, or supporting the work of people who transform grief into protection, because sometimes the smallest acts, paying attention, acting with care, can save a life. Natalia's voice may be gone, but her mission, her love, and her protection live. In every detector, in every alert, in every heartbeat that we learn to trust.